Hey, how's it going, everyone? Let's go ahead and talk about a dividend story. Have you heard of the finance book titled The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel? It basically talks about the behaviors surrounding money, such as what are the attributes that will make someone rich or poor in life. It's an interesting read that's worth the listen as an audiobook when you're pooping or out walking the dogs. And I feel blessed and loved because one of you recommended that I take a deeper look at one of the book's life lessons. So today I'm going to share with you the real story of Ronald Read, a janitor who ended up as a millionaire. No, he did not win the lottery or have a trust fund. I think his story is more relatable than that of Warren Buffett, the guy you see on your right, because although I resonate with Warren Buffett's strategy and methodology, he's not very relatable since he came from a background of wealth. For crying out loud, Warren's father was a congressman, and Warren was educated at two different Ivy League schools. So Warren was basically destined to become rich and wealthy from the get-go because he was born into the right family. On the other hand, Ronald Read is a rags to riches feel-good story, a common man that became wealthy. Now, Ronald Read was born in 1921, right after the World War I, which if you know anything about US history, America was going through a tough time economically. So needless to say, Ron grew up poor on a Vermont farm, and he was the first in his family to graduate from high school in 1940. And speaking of high school, he walked 4 miles every day to get to school because apparently there were no school buses in his rural town. But I bet your Italian grandma will one-up him and say she hiked up a mountain for 10 miles just to get to school. Anyways, after high school, Germany, Italy, and Japan were acting up, and it required the help of the United States to put down the bullies. So Ron enlisted into the United States Army because of World War II and did his duty to help stop the craziness. And after the military, he worked at his brother's gas station as a mechanic for a couple decades, and then he retired. But Ron felt tired and bored of doing the same things in retirement. So as an older man, he actually went back to work and found a part-time job as a janitor at JCPenney's. Nothing too extraordinary about Ron. Stay with me. But as I started researching about this guy and reading articles about him, you can't help but label him as a pretty good guy without even knowing him personally. Ron lived a pretty humble lifestyle, investing most of his money into the stock market. And here's a fun fact about Ron. He always wore clothes that were always too worn. I'm talking about clothes with holes and rips everywhere. In fact, one time he went to a breakfast diner and a stranger paid for his meal because they thought Ron was homeless. And what you see on the left side of your screen is the gas station that Ron worked at in Vermont. And no, Ron wasn't homeless, which I think is kind of funny because right now, Highend Fashion is all about that homeless look. For about 2 years of my life, I used to be a model. And some of the stuff these enlightened designers pumped out literally look like rags, what you see on your screen. This is a true story. There's even a high-end fashion brand right now that sells a roll of tape as a bracelet for $4,400 by Balenciaga. Would you buy it? I mean, call me smelly with small nipples, but I would rather just wear a t-shirt from Costco that's about $20, but that's just me. And getting back on topic, now what's remarkable about this guy is he never went to college, nor did he have any Wall Street friends. Ron was just an ordinary church-going guy living in rural Vermont. He practiced what he learned about the stock market and investing in general from reading the Wall Street Journal and Barron's, which was like finance YouTube back in the day. And he did this every single day to stay on top of the stock market health and sentiment among the companies he was interested in. He put his faith into the American economy and invested into the companies he believed were above average. More on that here in a bit. Ron consistently invested from his 30s in the 1950s all the way up to the 90s. By the end of his life in 2014, his portfolio was valued at about $8 million, and his holdings consisted of blue chip dividend-paying companies that had a monthly dividend payout of about $20,000. Imagine that, $240,000 in dividends a year. And believe it or not, but this was possible because he was a buy and hold, long-term investor type of guy with over 95 stocks. And love it or hate it, once he believed in a company, he never sold out of it, which meant there were some losers in his portfolio, including the Lehman Brothers that went bankrupt during the Great Recession. And to that, I would respectfully disagree, because if a business changes its fundamentals and adjusts its vision for the worse, that would be a reason for me to sell out of an investment. For instance, I support the Seattle Seahawks, what you see on your screen right now, that logo. They are my favorite NFL team. But if one day the franchise were to make an announcement saying, hey, dividend investors are losers and we don't want you here, then I would turn my back on the Seahawks. Or if they decide to throw the ball again near the end zone when they had the best running back in a Super Bowl game. After all these years, I still can't get over that event. We had Marshawn Lynch, which is the guy that you see on the right side of your screen, who was absolutely unstoppable and the best running back in the game. And Pete Carroll, who was the head coach at the time, he made the decision to throw the ball on the 1-yard line, which ended up being an interception. And we lost the Super Bowl because of that. Absolutely outrageous. And yes, my panties are up in a bunch right now. Yeah, I hear ya. However, times have changed and the cost of living is drastically different now. Back then in 1960, the median home valuation was just shy of $12,000. Now the median home price is give or take $400,000. And not only that, our wages have not kept up with inflation. So this idea of retiring from investing as an average American is just nonsense, and I hate you, and I'm clicking dislike on this video. First of all, calm your titties. I hear that side of the argument, and I agree, it's a valid call out. But did you know that most millionaires in the US are made? They're not born into wealth. It's pretty shocking to say the least, I know. But with time in the market and possessing a long-term horizon of at least 20 years, the story of Ron Reed is not crazy for you or me. Maybe it's too crazy for your cousin Joey, who still goes to the nightclub at 43 years old and tries to hit on girls that are half his age, but you're not like him. So although it might feel like a challenge depending on your current salary to hit a big portfolio, I'm here today to say that it's still possible with consistency and with the right dividend compounders on your side and a little bit of time. I alluded to it earlier, but let's talk about it. Why was Ronnie so successful as a stock picker? Well, first of all, he did not care what the market did on a single day or in a particular quarter. He just bought more shares and held on. He didn't allow his emotions to panic sell or to FOMO buy. Throughout the ages, his portfolio would have dipped by 30% or even 50% in valuation. But Ronnie stayed disciplined and he kept investing regardless of the external variables like inflation, war, deflation, and even policy changes. And with that stoic investing mindset, he acquired dividend compounders with cheese. And if you're wondering what he invested into back then, from the 1950s to the early 2000s, he acquired companies such as CVS, JP Morgan Chase, General Electric, Dow Chemical, and his largest positions were Wells Fargo and Procter & Gamble. So to sum it up, Ronnie was successful because he kept his emotions out of investing and he only chose dividend compounders. But not only that, Ronnie was also successful because his investing strategy was simple. Ron's criteria for considering a stock were: number one, the business had to be easy to understand. And number two, the business must generate predictable revenue and be consistent. And number three, the business must pay a solid dividend. Every single company that Ronnie invested into had a decent sized dividend. To put it into perspective to today's terms, each company probably had a dividend yield of 1.5% or higher. And here's the thing, Ron avoided trendy companies or flashy business models that seemed unstable at all costs. And that's because he did not consider his investments as just stocks. He saw them as businesses that he had ownership over. And if he didn't understand the fundamentals, he felt uncomfortable being an investor. Hopefully that makes sense. His beliefs cost him a lot of money in potential 10-bagger companies, but it also saved him a lot of heartache because he avoided the suspicious ones that ended up going belly up. With that said, I do want to call out and repeat that his track record isn't perfect because some of his investments didn't do too hot during certain time periods, but over the long run, they were okay. And that's because you can't predict company scandals and disasters from happening, so I don't blame him. It's like deciding to settle down one day and marrying that handsome man named Robert because of his beautiful hair. Then 5 years down the road, he is completely bald and developed a beer belly. We can't anticipate things like that. So if your partner is named Robert, well then I feel for you.
Well, hold on here, buddy. Why do you keep emphasizing that Ron invested into dividend-paying companies?
Well, I get it. Dividend investing is about as sexy as a fat man's receding hairline or your nasty foot smell. With dividend investing, you don't become rich overnight, and it's relatively boring. But the point that I'm trying to make here today is that Ron started investing in his 30s up until his death at 92. That's about 60 years in the market, with dividends working in his favor, compounding through the ages. For most of us, when we think about the phrase long-term investing, what is our horizon and outlook? I'll tell you, it does not take 60 years in the market to build a sweet portfolio that will eventually take care of you. It only really takes 20 years of diligent dividend investing to see an amazing portfolio and dividend yield. Case in point, watch my video why the first 100K is important. Why should I dividend invest to see what I mean. If you don't, your manager will give you a hard time tomorrow at work. And we don't want that because I know you're on the edge of throwing down your 2 weeks notice because you can't stand your manager. Jokes aside, now since Ron lived through the Great Depression and he knew what it meant to be hungry in his upbringing, it affected his mindset as an adult. Even when he was wealthy and a millionaire, he lived so frugally he never really enjoyed his money. Ron lived well below his means. Ron did not take vacations. Ron wore clothes that were falling apart. He drove a small Toyota Yaris and lived with a poverty mentality despite being in the top 1% of Americans. He had that starving perspective from his early years, even though he was rich. I'm talking about taking a handful of ketchup packets at McDonald's, putting it in your pocket, and home with you to refill the cupboard, or showering with cold water to save gas money. Honestly, I wish he would have enjoyed his money a little bit more, but he was a philanthropist at heart. He lived a humble life so that he could give away all of his money when he passed away on an altruistic angle. Instead of him enjoying his money, he allowed charities, a hospital, his loved ones, and a library to enjoy his dividend compounders. But imagine with me if he were to have donated here and there while he was still alive. He would have been able to see the tangible benefits his money was able to provide. But regardless, I don't think he cared about recognition or getting the spotlight. He lived the way he wanted to and then gave it all away the way he imagined. So I respect him for living life according to his values and principles. Just like if your whole personality revolves around politics and you post about it all over your Facebook, you're probably real fun to be around at parties and social gatherings. Oh man, I hope I didn't offend you, but stay with me. So the biggest life lesson here I took away from Ron is it's not how much salary you make in a year. It's not about how much you save either. Rather, it's about how much you invest and if you possess the virtue of patience. And when it comes to his story and consequences, it shouldn't matter if he was a janitor or even a school teacher. The fact is, he invested into high quality dividend compounders with cheese, and he just held on for the long term. I'm talking about for decades, through the ups and the downs. He's a story of a guy who had no formal qualifications or training, but because he invested into dividend stocks that were high quality, he did more than all right in the end. And I don't want to upset you any further, but following up on that last slide, please let money be a tool, not the goal. Live your life a little. I'm talking about letting your hair down and to grow a beard if you can. It's okay to spend money here and there for a new jacket or to go on a family vacation. Money should be used for us to enjoy life and to make better experiences, not to just hoard. Then again, on the flip side, there are those who spend all of their money on unnecessary materialistic possessions and resort to living paycheck to paycheck. Somewhere in between is probably the best. Hopefully, the tale of Ron Reed was interesting to you because it was for me. I enjoyed it. With that said, dividend compounders with cheese signing out. Stay safe, everyone, and I will talk to you next time.